So I go to this phone booth, I wish my sister, and then my mom comes on the line, right? And she doesn't know why she asked me this question, but she just said, "Is your life in danger?" And all I could say was yes. So she said, "Okay, Dad is going to take the next train and come and get you." And so we just made up some cool story about me needing to go home, right, to my parents' place, and how I'd be back in a couple of weeks. Right, so I just left.
Aparna's story takes us to the other side of the planet as a child prodigy's journey is derailed by a dangerous relationship that ends up being the very fuel to helping countless individuals around the world through speaking, TED Talks, authoring books, counseling, nonprofit work, and more. Journey with us from India back to Austin, and be sure to like and subscribe so that we can continue to bring more stories just like this to you. We run in similar circles, and so I get to hear about you a lot. People just describe you as like genius, as the TED Talk person, author, amazing story. Like, I hear you described in so many ways. So I'm like, this is so cool just to get to sit down, talk to you, and hear your story. And so thanks for your willingness to share it. And, just generally, we kind of go in order. So even starting out, your childhood is going to be really unique to our audience. And I'm excited to hear it wherever you think would, pick up your kind of family of origin. How would you describe that?
So I grew up in India. So I was born in India, grew up in India. But for those that have never been there, it's a really small country as compared to the United States, but it has over 1 billion people. So I mean, that itself is mind-boggling, right? Yeah, it is hard to comprehend. And my dad was in the Air Force, right? So I kind of grew up in the defense. And, just like in the States, in India too, every 2-3 years you would get transferred. So I was born in one place, and, a couple of years, you kept kind of hopping around, right? And of course, that has its ups and downs. Childhood was awesome, growing up. School, I think the first couple, I want to say maybe till I was in the middle school, it was good, right? And then I hit, the teen years, and that's when suddenly things started shifting a little bit, and kind of became more conscious of and I guess as most teens are, right? There's some issue that you kind of grapple with, and I think in India, unfortunately, again maybe this is something people aren't aware of, but colorism is huge, right? So colorism basically is you're kind of judged by the color of your skin tone, right? So over there, the darker you are, the less, less desirable it is, right? So lighter skin, is more desired than a darker skin. And so not only was I the darkest in my class, I was the darkest in my school.
Wow.
Right? And, and that was hard. I mean, I never really thought about it. It wasn't really an issue till I was maybe, 12, 13, 14, right? Where you suddenly start kind of becoming conscious of, how you look or how other people see you, right? So thankfully, my family never brought it up, right? My sister's kind of lighter toned than me, so it wasn't really an issue at home as much as it was an issue at school, right? And I think that was the first time I think my sense of who I was very different from how I thought I saw myself, right? Because suddenly now you start kind of seeing yourself through the eyes of other people, right? And so though people would say stuff like, well, Aparna, you have beautiful eyes, or you have a beautiful smile, oh, wish you were a little lighter skinned, right? So that hurt.
And would you hear this from more peers? Would you hear it from superiors? Like all the above? Like where would that?
Right, no, that's a great question. It was peers, right? So it was usually in school, and weirdly enough, I'm not even sure if people can relate to this, but I'd also hear it like on the streets, right? So eve teasing, I don't know if you've heard of that term, but eve teasing is something that's really prevalent in those societies, right? Where you'd be walking on the road and somebody might whistle, right? Yeah. Or they'd make a comment, on your physical being, right? As a woman. So I would hear things like, being directed at me, in, things like, oh, you look very nice, but, go get Fair and Lovely. So Fair and Lovely, by the way, as weird as this is, it's a cream that you can actually buy in many parts of Southeast Asia.
Okay.
And that cream is supposed to make you look lighter skin because it has some bleaching products, right? So even till date, right, it's one of those products that is always available in any shop that you'll go to in Southeast Asia, right? So to answer your question, it was people that I knew and total strangers, right? So again, that was hard, right?
Yeah.
Because that was hard.
Especially, you're saying the switch, like the moment of like being conscious of the world, conscious of this pressure from others now that maybe wasn't as prevalent younger and is now a part of your discovery, who you are, your identity coming into. Wow. And would you say like, or how would you describe the experience for you, like in terms of the pain, or what did you start to question, or how did you respond or react to it?
Right. Now when I kind of look back, it was hard. And I wish I could say it was easy. It wasn't. Thankfully, I was in an all-girls school, right? So even that, there were no boys, so I think that made it a little easier. But it was hard. And, and when you're at that age, that's what you focus on, right? So even though there are nice things people might say about you, right? Even just as a person or, even how you look or how you dress, as a teenager, I think you're drawn more towards what's missing, right? Or what people are saying is not good about you, which I'm not even sure why people put so much emphasis on, the outside physical packaging of a person anyway. And so that happened with me too, right? So that was hard.
Do you feel like it impacted a confidence? Do you feel like it drove you to work harder, like, prove people, or what would you say?
For sure. It's interesting you bring this up, right? So it's almost like, there was this need to overcompensate, right? Or never mind if I'm this, but, I'm something else, right? And so that was academics, right? So suddenly a lot of my energies just went into the academic space, right? And, for what it's worth, I was doing well academically, in high school. And, and so that, unfortunately, became where I put a lot of my worth in.
From high school, did you go to a formal secondary school? It seemed like you have like 90 different degrees. So I don't know what the first one was or in that timeline when that happened, but what was next from high school?
So we have something known as board exams, which is, across the entire country. Everybody's, so almost like your SATs, right? So the equivalent of that.
Sure.
So you have like a board exam across the entire country. And I happened to top it for my state, right? So again, that was that, that push from an academic point of view, and that was my high.
Yeah, you said you were the top of your...
Yeah, so in my area, right? In my school and in that, and you're kind of... Like here you have different zip codes, there you have different, little smaller geographical locations. So I ended up, topping in that little city that I was in.
How many people would that, because like for us it's by school, right?
Right,
so
now this is thousands
thousands
and thousands of people,
Okay.
So I ended up, and I took accounting.
You're a genius. Okay, I'm getting it,
So this was accounting and commerce of all things, right? So accounting, commerce, law. Ended up topping and then went into commerce, like an undergrad degree for commerce in one of the really good universities where I was able to get in. Continued to do well there. It's a 3-year program. An undergrad is 3 years, unlike 4 years over here. And I say this from a place of humility, but I ended up getting 8 out of the 9 awards that were possible over 3 years from an academic point of view. So at that point, the next logical step was chartered accountancy. Right, once I finished my undergrad degree.
Okay.
And since I topped, people said, okay, now, next thing is, a place like Pricewaterhouse. So those days it was called Pricewaterhouse, what's called PricewaterhouseCoopers now. And again, that's again an exam that everybody sits for, because you've got to earn your space to be there. And I ended up, getting accepted for that internship. So it was like a 3-year articleship or internship program. And for people who are familiar with the world of chartered accountancy, I must have been like, maybe 2021.
Okay.
And, as an accountant, you kind of go around, you're looking at everybody's books, so there's that weird sense of power you have as a young person, which is scary.
Yeah.
Right? Because, you're going to these big companies and, auditing their stuff.
Yes.
And of course, I mean, you're the smallest peg within that team, but you're still part of that team that's, that's auditing these companies. So there was this weird sense of power, but there was still an emptiness, right? So I liked what I was doing, and I guess I was good at it, but I just felt there was something missing, know?
Yeah. So you said you did that for a year and a half, and what was next? What led to a change?
There was just this disconnect,
Sure.
There was just this, and I don't know if it was like an existential crisis at the age of 21. Perhaps it was that, because I'd achieved, like the highest level, that I could have.
Yes.
But it wasn't doing anything for me.
Yes.
Right? So there was still this sense of, is this it?
Yes.
I hope this is not it, right? Because, though from the outside, it looked like I was successful.
Yes.
I wasn't feeling it. Right?
Yeah.
And I think that led to, a space where I was, what? I can't see myself doing this for the rest of my life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? And I was 21. I'm not sure how I had the guts, but I told my parents, I'm chucking this up.
Yeah.
This is not working for me.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And, given the system that I kind of grew up in, giving my family background, given that this was, 25 plus years ago, they were not expecting it, right? Nobody was expecting me to have the guts to say, not doing this, right?
Yes.
And, I think just my mom, she had the grace to say, you know what, okay, you take a year, right? Figure out what you want to do. But whatever it is, make sure this is something that you're truly happy with, right? And make sure you're really good at it. So I think that was that Asian parent thingy kind of came in, right? Again, well, whatever it is, make sure you're really good at it, right? But that you enjoy it, right? So, and again,
So not super shaming, not like that sounds like
no. I've been really blessed to have, my parents were. I mean, they were rock solid.
Yeah, that sounds like a pretty incredible response. Yeah.
So I took a year off. I just kind of spoke to a lot of people. I shadowed a lot of people. And I think within 3-4 months, I kind of, was talking to someone who said that they worked, with other people. And I was like, okay, what is that? Because I was just so used to just working with books. So suddenly they're like, well, what, we work with people. I was like, okay, what is that about?
Yeah.
And she said, why don't you come and shadow me? And so she used to work in a nonprofit. And this was a nonprofit for people who were experiencing schizophrenia.
Okay.
Right? So I said, okay, I'll come. It was like a day, day boarding care kind of place. So I went there, and that was the turning point for me, right? I was like, you know what? I think I found my calling, right? Just working with people, right? And to figure out whether it was them, whether it was their family members, whether it was even just a staff that had chosen this space of mental health, right?
Yeah.
To me, that blew my mind, right?
Wow.
And I just wanted to know, why are people the way they are, right? What makes them think a certain way? Why do they take certain actions, right? So it was almost like moving from the world of books. I wanted to, if I could live in people's heads, I found that was thrilling, right? So I think that was the shift. And so I continued to volunteer in a few nonprofits that kind of work in the space of mental health, well-being. And then I went back to my parents and I said, this is what I want to do. It took them a while to adjust, right? Because this was like black and white, right? It was so different, right?
Yes.
And I'd never ever spoken about wanting to work with people.
Yes.
But they said, okay, you obviously can't do this with a commerce degree, right?
Yeah.
So what are you going to do next, right? So that's when I changed my life, my career around. Applied to some of the best schools that were available, and I think I was one of the few commerce graduates who actually got into a master's program in clinical social work and in the whole social sciences.
Yes.
Because most of the people that came from a background of psychology or sociology. So somehow this group that interviewed me
yes.
fell for the story that I had to give. I don't know, right? and they said, okay,
journey,
So they said, okay, let's give her a seat and let's see what this person's going to do. So that's when I joined my master's degree in social sciences.
Okay.
It's been a long road since then.
Yes. Yeah, well, I mean, you said you love numbers, you love data, so to love the people side too feels like a very unique combo. A lot of times we try to put people in one of those two buckets,
right,
one or the other, so I love it.
Yeah.
So you got your master's, did you enter a career from there immediately, like after that? Or?
Yeah, so I did about maybe a year or so, and then I continued, So something big kind of happened during my time here is, what we were kind of talking about earlier, just about this relationship. So that kind of derailed me for a while, but then I did get back on track. And in India, you have something known as an MPhil degree, which is like a pre-doctoral program.
Okay.
So you finish your master's and then it's another 2-year degrees, and then, if you finish that, then you spend another 3 years and you get like a PhD.
Yeah.
But I did do the MPhil in psychiatric social work, right? And I loved it. Right?
Yeah.
So I knew that this was my thing.
You said that relationship, it was when you were pursuing your master's degree, before that?
Yeah.
Are you willing to go into a little bit of that?
Sure,
in this?
no, absolutely.
So how did that start?
Yeah. So, so I was in my first year, right? And I was away from home, right? So my undergrad, I was still at home, still under the, the loving, circle of friends and family. And, so for my master's degree, I went to another part in India, right? And I had to live, in the hostel. And, I was excited, right? I mean, I loved it. I was excited. I was looking forward to it. And I'm just going to go back to my story. If you remember, so though I was achieving all this academic success, right? My sense of who I was still pretty poor, right? So, and I think especially just my sense of self-esteem from a physical point of view, right? From a body image point of view, was not too great, right? So here I meet this person, right? And by many standards on the outside, he was one of the more popular, guys on the campus. He was on a committee, right? I mean, he was up there, right?
Sure.
By most standards.
Yeah.
And he took an interest in me. Right? This was, I think, within a month or so of joining. He took an interest in me and he started pursuing me, right? And to me, it was shocking. I was like, are you sure it's me? Is there someone behind me that this person's interested in? But it was me, right? And I think it fed this need to be desired. That's the worst reason you want to be attracted to another person, right? Just because they say, you look a certain way that they desire, right? I think that's the worst. But of course, I learned that later on. But anyway, so I gave in, right, to this person, and we got married within a year of me joining there. So I was like barely 22 at this point. My parents were not happy, and I think my mom maybe had picked up a sense. Mothers,
Instinct
just
and-
know,
yeah.
And she was like, you know what, this person's not right for you, right? And they didn't even know what I saw in him because he wasn't even, like the person that they ever thought I'd be attracted to, right? Not just from a physical space, but just, from a personality space, right? But of course, I wasn't listening to them, right? I was, hell bent on, being with this person, right? So they said, okay, then fine, get married, right? So got married, and I think within he came with his family to where my parents were because he was from a different part of India. And we were on the train, I remember, going back, right, to his place because there was going to be a reception there. And that was the first time he slapped me, right? And I was shocked, right? So I think I always, now looking back, right? I mean, not now, even, after all of that had wrapped up, looking back, I should have picked up traits, right? On that this person was, had issues of his own, right? And I didn't see it though, right? Because I was just blinded, by this gap or this need that he was filling, right? So even though this happened on the train, family was on the train, I just kept quiet, right? And of course he apologized and he said, I'm really stressed and, I'm sorry. And of course, for anybody who's ever been in a domestic violence situation, that that's a pattern, right? There's abuse and then there's,
Kind of
apologies
repair,
and apologies and apologies, and you get sucked back in, right? So that was my life for the next, 8-9 months, right? And kept quiet, went through the motions. I left my undergrad degree, right? So I took a break. I wasn't even sure if I was going to go back because he didn't want me to go back. Though when we were getting married, he'd said, not an issue, we'll get married, you go finish up. But of course, everything changed, right? Once we were married and I was a possession, right? And he knew that I wouldn't leave, right? So I think that was tough because he had a job in a small town and I moved there, so it was just the two of us, right? There was no family. And that's when it started getting really, really bad, right? I thought it was just one slap, but it never stops at that, right? So
I'm so sorry. Like I'm even just noticing the reaction coming up. I'm sitting here listening to this like sweet, funny, smart woman, and like just the concept of somebody willing to cross that line, treat you that way, devalue humanity. It just is like it pisses you off listening to it. I mean, it does. Being as far removed and not seeing somebody, it's And you said 8 or 9 months of that was your reality, but not feeling like you can tell somebody because you're believing these lies that it's your fault. And you got yourself into this or deserve this or whatever it might be.
Yeah. And, and I think it's that typical cycle of domestic violence, right? Where there's the abuse and then there's, the apologies, right? And you want so hard to believe that you can change this person, right? Yeah, so he would lock me up in the house, right? And for those that are familiar with, just domestic violence, that's usually the pattern, right? Because he didn't trust me.
Control.
Control, absolutely. He didn't trust me. He didn't want me to meet anyone. He would open the door when he'd come back from work. The substance, he used to drink, that became worse, right? And of course, when he drank, then the abuse would get way worse. And, as I think about it, I married this person because I thought he was filling a need in my self-esteem, right? But I was now at a position that even that little self-esteem that I had was shattered, right? So, and then, it takes you to a place where you start believing the lies that you hear, right? This person saying that no one else is going to love you the way I love you, right? And no one's ever going to be with you, right? And you feel stuck, right? So that was hard, right? And I didn't have my academics, that other piece that was like a little balm to my self-esteem didn't exist, right? Because I couldn't go back. And this isn't the days of the cell phone, right? So this is the days of, of phones that were plugged into the wall, or when you needed to make, so even between states, if you had to make a call, you had to go to another place, right? Like a phone booth and make a call. So I obviously wasn't able to connect with my parents, right? So I wasn't talking to anybody. those are the days of writing letters, right? So I would write letters. He would insist on posting it. I later on found out he never posted anything to my parents, right? Letters that would come to the mailbox, which he would check before he came in. So letters that my parents were sending or others were sending me, I never got, right? So I was completely isolated, completely shut away from the world, right? So that was a really, really hard part of my life, yeah.
It like sounds like the plot of a horror movie. I mean, it's like one of those, like, I mean, I just can't imagine that stretch. What was there a breaking point? Was there just an opportunity to like ask for help? Was there like what turned the corner or changed the circumstances?
No, thank you for asking that. I think that was one of my, if you don't mind me saying, one of my God moments, right?
Yeah.
It was almost like a miracle, right? And till then, I really didn't know God, right? I was born in a family. My grandparents were religious. We weren't, right? So I really didn't know God. So I didn't even have God to speak to, right? So it was completely isolating.
Total isolation.
Yeah, completely, right? Nothing, no conversations. The only conversation I had in my head were nasty conversations, right? But interestingly enough, thankfully we had a TV, right? And I used to watch, these shows while I was locked up, either nursing my wounds, but I'd put the TV on. And so, again, this is 25 plus years ago. And suddenly I see Oprah Winfrey, a show of Oprah Winfrey, the talk show. So this used to come in a small city in India. Who would have known, right? I'm sure even Oprah wouldn't even know that, this was being broadcasted, thousands and thousands of miles away in this little place in India. And, at that time, as luck might have it, but now I know that was a God moment for me. She was doing a show on domestic violence, right? And she had these other women in the States, right, who had gone through abuse, and she was interviewing them. And I felt like she was talking to me, right? Because she just kind of spoke about, how it's not your fault, right? You don't have to live in this. And, I was just hearing the stories of these other women who had gotten out of it, right? And they were kind of, talking about it on stage. And through that, I just felt, the message was for me, right? Because till then, I really wasn't able to speak to anybody, nothing, right? I was so cut away. It was like I was in a little jail cell, just by myself. And suddenly there's this voice coming through of this woman, thousands of miles away, saying, this is not your fault, right? And you deserve better, right? And I see these other women who've gotten out of it, right? And to me, that was the first time I kind of realized, what? It's not going to change, right? This person, is so physically abusive, right? And this is not me. My parents had never even raised their hand against me, right? But here I was, taking this abuse, somehow believing the lies that it was my fault, right? And here I hear this person saying that, no, it's not your fault, right? And you can get out of it. And there is life possible beyond it, right? So I think that was the first thing where that seed got planted in my head. And the second God moment, which happened, almost at that same week, was it was my sister's, I think, 20th birthday, my younger sister. And, like I said, in India those days, there was, to make a call, you had to go to a phone booth, right? So most of those phone booths were in a common marketplace, right? So it's not from home. So this guy came back and, I said, hey, it's my sister's birthday. I want to wish her, right? And he knew that if I didn't wish her, people would know something was off, right? Because my sister and I are so close, right? So he knew that, okay, I'm assuming maybe he knew that, if we didn't go, it would raise a red flag. But anyway, so we went, right? And the phone booths are really tiny, right? It's like only one person can fit in. So this was the first time that I was actually able to have a communication without, him being around, right? So I go to this phone booth, I wish my sister, and then my mom comes on the line, right? And, till now, my mom and I kind of speak about it, and she doesn't know why she asked me this question, but she just said, is your life in danger, right? Again, this was like another God moment, right, for me, because why would she even ask a question like that? It's a birthday party. I've just wished my sister, but she says, is your life in danger? And all I could say was yes, right? Because I couldn't even go into the details, right? I just said, yes, Ma, my life is in danger. So she said, okay, Dad is going to take the next train and come and get you. And I got out of the phone booth. I had to act as calm as I could. And to be honest, I wasn't even sure. It almost seems like a movie script now, right? Even as I'm thinking about it now, it's been, close to 25 plus years ago. But 2 days later, my dad shows up, right? And the reason it took 2 days is because there were no flights out, right, to that place. It was a small space. And the train was a 2-night journey, right? And as a parent myself, I can't even imagine what my dad must have felt like, right, because he had to make that journey, not really knowing, all he knew was what my mom had said, right? And they didn't have any details. But he had to make that journey. And here's a guy who's, an Air Force officer, your stereotypical defense guy. But poor guy, I feel bad for him, But anyway, so he made that journey. And he came and got me, right? My then husband was there. I didn't tell him what happened, right? My dad didn't say anything either. And I can just imagine what control it took my dad to not say anything to him, right? Because he just wanted me to get out of there, right? And so we just made up some cock and bull story about me needing to go home, right, to my parents' place, and how I'd be back in a couple of weeks, right? So I just left with just, what I was wearing, didn't even take clothes. I couldn't, right, because I was pretending to just... And I know my dad was shocked when he saw me, right? He told me that later on, because this wasn't the daughter he had seen the last time, right? I used to like to dress up and, but no, I was just, so he was shocked to see me. But well, we got on the train and, even at that point, foolishly, I still thought things would get better, maybe I'd go back, right? So I think even when I was leaving, it wasn't with the intent of never returning, right? I wasn't even thinking, you stop thinking, right? It's almost like you kind of...
So you're not even thinking that I'm being saved or rescued. It's just like this intervention kind of help moment, but not...
Nothing,
yeah.
but it's not sinking
cycle,
in. You're still, it's not sinking in. And, but anyway, but that was a turning point. So, I went back with my parents, with my dad, and then that was a whole different phase after that. But when I went home, within 2 weeks, my dad ended up with a heart attack, right? And I think, again, that was another God moment. I think that was the third God moment. And I know it sounds weird, heart attack, what do you mean God moment, right? But we happened to be going to church, right? So my dad, my mom and I, we went to church. And on the way back, from church itself, my dad tells my mom, you drive. And as we were driving on the opposite side of the road, my mom sees emergency room, right? And so, later on, when we kind of spoke about it, my mom said, I don't know what came into me.
Yeah.
Right? I was on the way to home. I look across. I see emergency room. I just look in the rearview mirror. I see Dad. Yeah. And something told me, drive to the emergency room.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
And there was no reason because he had just retired from the Air Force. He's only, 49?
Yeah.
Peak of health. There was nothing.
Yeah.
But there was, again, just this, voice that led her saying, go to the emergency room, right? So we drove to the emergency room. He was in the midst of a heart attack.
Oh
right?
gosh.
So thank God we went because, the
Yeah.
doctors were really clear that he wouldn't have survived, right? If we'd gone home, we would have lost him. Uh, they said it was stress related, right? So then that kind of, again, put me in that space of, oh,
yeah.
shucks, it's me. But my parents were amazing. They never, blamed me. They never made me feel that it was my fault, right? And so dad's sitting in the ICU. I'm sitting at home, having come out of the space. Mom is torn between sitting with dad, sitting with me. I have some wonderful aunts, my mom's sisters, dad's sisters. They all kind of stepped in, kind of just to help out. My sister was there. She was really young, but she's kind of stepped in just to hold that space. But there was just so much crisis that the family was feeling at that point. But I think through this all, as weird as it sounds, even as I think about it now, there was still just that sense of safety, right? But I think that was kind of a turning point for us as a family, right? Where we just started, reflecting more, right? On all these God moments that we kind of had, right? And we realized that, what, there had to be someone looking out for us, right? There were just too many coincidences, right? This was beyond just coincidences, right? It was just the right timing, right place, right thought. There had to be more to this story, right? And of course, from a legal point of view, there was a lot of back and forth because he didn't want to let go, so he came. There was a lot of drama that ensued, restricting, what's it called? Not restricting orders. What's the...
Restraining
order. Thank you so much. Yeah, restraining order, right? So there was a restraining order put in place, went through the whole court system, took a couple years to kind of get out of that. And in India at that point, if you weren't married for a year, it was called an annulment. And so thank God it was just about less than a year, because if it was more than a year, it would have taken way longer to get a divorce. It's through that brokenness that it's almost like you discover a new part of who you are.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that kind of fed back into why I do what I do. Right? And so that's a part of me. That's not the whole part of me.
Yeah.
But I think that definitely makes me who I am today too. Right? Just the second chance at life.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Wow. I'm curious, even as you speak to that, getting free from an environment or a relationship like that is one thing, like that's its own step. But then the healing journey, the aftermath after, are there any pillars that you would speak to that are part of, your healing journey, whether family or counseling or faith or, what you would say was instrumental to that?
Right. I think family for sure, right? Because if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't be here today, right? I'm pretty sure I'd still be stuck, right? So I think family for sure, and faith, which I didn't have before, right? So to me, it was almost like, this was that turning point in just my faith journey, right? Where, I knew that, and I know this is going to sound so weird when I say this, and I don't wish for anybody to go through what I went through, but I think it's because I went through what I went through, as hard as it was, it also brought me to a place of just belief in something bigger than me, right? And it always kind of reminds me of, there's this Japanese art form, where they fix broken pottery, is called kinskurai. And so, when pottery breaks, instead of just throwing it away, they usually fix it back, and they fix it back with gold. So now, once it's fixed back with gold, it's almost like it's more valuable now than it was when it was full, right? Or, in its first form, right? So for me, I think that was my journey, right? It's almost like, God met me in that brokenness, right? And God put me back together, right? And that's part of my history, right? I can't deny it, right? I can't run away from it, right? But it's almost like I've been stuck back with gold in a way, God's gold. And today my life is more valuable than I felt it was before, right? So there's almost like, there's beauty in that brokenness, right? And I feel that I'm able to pull from that, right? To do what I do today. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but...
Yeah, beautiful was the word that's coming to mind before you said the word beauty, just that picture. And to me, it's one of the most powerful things in the world to hear people speak about their suffering in the way that you just did when they've gone through some healing and gone through some reflection, the depth to which you speak about it, not that people would say they're necessarily glad for their suffering. That's too trite or too minimizing of the pain, but there can be this awareness of, maybe even appreciation for the strength or the growth or the learning or where you might not be, without it. And it's until you've gone through some of that, or you've walked with somebody in that, it can be difficult to explain all the layers of it. And at the same time, you want to give hope to people that are in it, that there is a different way, that there is a better, that you never imagined on the other side of this potentially.
Absolutely.
So I appreciate so much, you going into that.
No, absolutely.
And you've said a couple times in there how that's impacted a lot of what you do today. What would be some of those things you've been involved in, and it could be anywhere in the 30 years since. What are some of the things that you would point to that it's currently influencing?
Right. So I think part of what I've learned and, I continue to hold on to is hope, restoration, the things that were really painful, which was, this relationship, right? This romantic relationship, this marriage. At one point, I did swear off all men, of course, right? I mean, I was never again, right? Never going to get married, hate all men, most men. But, here I am, right? Loving husband, who's extremely supportive, who's walked through, this journey with me. And, this year, in fact, is our 25th wedding anniversary.
Wow,
yeah.
Congratulations. That's amazing.
25th wedding anniversary. Yeah. We have 2 wonderful children. Young people. If they hear me say children, they may not like it. But young people, right? And, people, if they see us today, they'd never know that there's a backstory to this, right? So again, the message is, just because it's been bad, it doesn't mean it's always going to be bad, right? There is hope, right? So I think that's one of those things that I keep reminding, not just myself, but the people that I work with, right? And the second is just this whole aspect of resilience and second chances, right? I think that's big, right? And for me, I got here because of God, right? And a God-given family, which includes my parents, my sister, my extended family, my husband, and my kids, right? I believe these are all God's blessings to me, right? And they're kind of my answered prayer, right? So I think that kind of formed the basis of what Sanjay and I, went on to do, right? Because we both had our backstories. God kind of brought us together, and we knew that there was a purpose, for us to be together. So while we were in India, we started a few companies. I kind of worked with, schools with young children, worked with, families, and worked in the corporate space, right? So we had our own consulting organization, and we did that for 10 years. And, again, from a place of humility, we were pretty successful, right? Both of us as a couple, just the businesses that we kind of built. And it worked really well because, we were also able to be there for the kids, which, sometimes there's this choice, right, of working in an office space or working, for ourselves. And it was work that was purposeful, right? It was mission-driven, right? There was value in what we did. Right, so it was in the space of life skills. It was in the space of what's called positive psychology. I worked with a lot of women groups, in the space of women empowerment. Got opportunities to do a TED Talk. So I did a TED Talk, wrote a book, co-authored a book with, that was published by Bloomsbury, which is the Harry Potter fame. So my kids are more kicked about the fact that it was same people that, you know,
Yeah,
the same
of course.
publisher that did the Harry
Yeah.
Potter, right?
Yes.
But yeah, so, and that was released, interestingly enough, that was released since this is, you know, March and Women's Day is around the corner. This was released, I want to say, was it 2017?
Okay.
On Women's Day.
Okay.
By the then Vice President of India, right?
Wow.
So this was big, you know, that we
Yeah.
even had that opportunity. The book kind of got released,
Yes.
you know, on Women's Day, and this was a book that kind of captured, you know, the life stories of women in India, you know, who'd had trials, tribulations, second chances, you know, love, hope, restoration, and you know, and I just feel blessed that we were able to meet so many women. You know, we were able to create that platform where they were able to kind of share from their life, right? And just that project itself was, again, just such a great reminder, right, of the human spirit, right? So did that, and you know, now that we're back in the States. I love Austin, by the way.
Yeah.
Right.
Same.
Yeah,
Same.
I love it. Right. And you know, so here I've had the opportunity recently to kind of work with a nonprofit. You know, called Yesterday Is Gone, which is transitional housing for women who've been in abusive situations, you know, domestic violence, as well as their children, just as a place for them to heal and restore. So I've had that opportunity, you know, to kind of be part of that community. And again, this is, you know, an example of no life experience is ever wasted, even the hard ones, right? Even those hard life experiences can get used in a way to restore and build someone else, right? So I do that. I came back, I did a doctoral program, which I've, you know, wanting to do for a while. So
Degree 91 or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the last thing that I have started doing now in the last year and a half or so is I also teach at Columbia University, master's level on mental health, human growth and behavior. You know, one of the topics that I touch upon is, you know, domestic violence, right? So as I kind of, you know, plot those dots, right? It's almost like now I'm at a place where I can, you know, it's almost like whatever I had gone through,
Yes.
right? I've been able to take it and I'm not even sure if this is going to come out right, but it's almost like breathe life into some of those experiences, but almost from another aspect, right? Of hoping, you know, either there are other young girls like myself, you know, when I was, you know, 15, 16, who might be facing the same issues, to let them know that, you know, you don't have to look for love in the wrong places or the wrong relationships, right? So I think that's one thing that I'm hoping I've done and I will continue to do, right? The other is, if you are in a situation where you're stuck, know that you don't have to be stuck forever, right? If you get out of it, don't feel that that is all that defines you. That's a part of you, right? But that's not the whole of you, right? There is hope after that, and you can redefine yourself. You know, there are second chances, right? So I think that's the other piece. And then, of course, just like I said, I love data, geeky, research.
Yes.
So kind of just bringing that whole thing back into an academic space, right? But then I'm actually able to talk about it from a theoretical point of view or a research point of view, or this is what the evidence-based research says about it, and you know, trauma-informed care, survivor, models of how do you deal with, you know, women who've been in domestic violence situations. So it's almost kind of bringing that whole wrapper of an academic space, which also thrills me, weirdly enough.
Yeah.
You know, but it's like there's so many different aspects that I've been able to touch, and so that's where I am today.
I think you're exactly why we do Story 512. Like you know, that's the inspiration exactly. You know, and you're such a force multiplier for good. You know, across the planet now. You know, and especially in resources and mediums that can reach thousands and thousands of people. It's so inspiring. And I think if somebody's watched this whole thing, they can say that we're saying that without having to minimize any part of the story, but to just acknowledge now what you've chosen to do, which is your choice. Like, you know, you chose to respond that way, and lean in and help others. And I feel like that layer you're speaking of when you speak to it is that you're not just the theoretical and the facts. You're like a living example of the hope and empathy, and you can connect with people in it feeling hopeless. And that's transferable even beyond domestic violence. That's transferable to so many of the pains and sufferings of life. And so this has been amazing. I've just loved every second I could go, a couple days listening to more details and stories from you. And so I just really appreciate it. The question that we ask every guest just at the end is, we think about that whole story now, just today, what inspires you in this moment, like this season? And it may be the same thing that's inspired you for 30 years, but what gets you out of bed? What excites you? What are you looking forward to? What's inspiring you right now?
I think just people, right? And, helping people be the best versions that I know that, they can be, but sometimes they don't see it, right? And I think, again, maybe it's just my faith, right? Where I know that, you're loved by God, right? Just as you are. It's unconditional. You don't have to prove anything. You don't have to do anything to earn it. And hoping that people are able to see themselves the way God sees them, right? So to me, that's what gets me excited, right? So whether it's, my work, my family, whatever it is, right? That gets me excited, right? You know what? God loves you, right? Whether you see it or not, right? And God sees you in a different way than even the world sees you, or even the way you see yourself, right? So to me, I think that's the thread that kind of gets me excited.
Wow.
So,
Wow. Well, this has been amazing. Seriously,
Thank you.
I appreciate it. You're an incredible human. It's an amazing story.
Thank you.
So I'm grateful for your willingness to share
Thank you.
and help a lot of people with it.
Thank you.
So.
I didn't cry as much as I thought I would. Yeah.